Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pathways to Wealth. It is time for Book Review Friday, where every Friday I bring you a new book that can help you either create more income, build more wealth, or upgrade an important area in your life. And in this episode, we are covering one of my favorite business books, which is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. Now, if you don't know Peter, you've probably been living under a rock. Peter's the co-founder of PayPal, among many other things, and just an incredible entrepreneur and innovator. And this book, I think, is required reading for anybody that wants to start a company, be in the tech space, understand innovation, or change the world. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So following the format of Book Review Friday, we're going to start by looking at the main theme of the book to help you understand kind of the 30,000-foot overview of what the book's about, and then dive into the key points. So the main theme of the book is 0 to 1, which means innovation. Okay, 0 to 1 means innovation, creating something new as opposed to just copying things that work. And in the book, Peter uses the example of China, how, over the past several decades in America, we've had incredible real innovation, new technology, which has dramatically changed the world. And in the book, he uses the example of how China has, through globalization, has essentially copied a lot of the things that have worked for Western civilization over the past several decades, where China went from their old school economy and their old school way of life and have now moved into using a lot of the new technology that's been developed over the past several decades. And one thing that he talks about in the book, and this is kind of the overarching theme, is how to build and scale a business that's going to thrive for decades. And that leads us to key takeaway number 1, which he talks about the difference between a monopoly versus competition. And he talks about how if you're going to build a business, you really want to build a monopoly business versus something that's just competing. And I'll just kind of define the difference. So capitalism is competition. It's another way of saying competition, where profits get competed away. So if you have somebody that starts a mortgage company and then all of a sudden you have 1,500 other mortgage companies, that first mortgage company is going to, at first, enjoy really big margins and really big profits. They're going to be able to charge higher fees. They're going to be able to charge higher interest rates. And then as more mortgage companies come online and start to advertise, that's going to compete away the profits. That's going to lower interest rates. That's going to lower fees. And that's really good for some industries and for the consumer, but for a business, competition and capitalism is actually not a good thing for long-term sustainable profitability. And when he talks about monopoly, he really makes the distinction that we're not just talking about government monopolies like, Comcast, the most hated company in the nation, basically has a monopoly on certain industries. That's an example, in my opinion, of a bad monopoly where, the customer suffers. There's lower customer service, higher prices for a less valuable product. But he does talk about how in a monopoly, the company gets to keep the profits. And if you want to create a business that's going to stand the test of time, then don't build an undifferentiated commodity business. An example is the mortgage business. So my first kind of foray into the business field outside of my first company, which was a car detailing company that I sold when I was 19, my first kind of real financial industry business was a mortgage company. I worked at an online discount mortgage broker. And what that meant was there was basically a boiler room. Just imagine a big office of like 100 guys and ladies sitting at desks in the early 2000s when we had the refinance boom, when interest rates for mortgages were coming down from 9, 8, 7%, and then they dipped into the 5 and 6% range. You basically had the entire nation of homeowners that could refinance their interest rates for lower rates. And so at first, the mortgage company I worked with dominated. They were doing billions of dollars of loans every month. And then as the internet, this was like 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, as more of these internet mortgage companies started popping up, interest rates got more and more competitive, and I saw this company's profits dwindle down over time. And that's because they were selling a commodity. They were selling mortgages. It was something that was undifferentiated. They didn't have a monopoly. They didn't have any kind of proprietary technology that was going to help them sustain long-term profits. So that company actually ended up going out of business a few years later. So just to kind of cover the difference between monopoly and competition, and to kind of introduce kind of the good type of monopoly, which is a creative monopoly, where you have a company that creates new products. It actually innovates and creates products that benefits everybody and sustains long-term profits for the creator, okay? Versus competition, where ultimately it leaves no profits for anybody, has no meaningful differentiation, and is a constant struggle for survival for the company. So hopefully by now you can begin to see why a creative monopoly is actually a good thing. Again, not the old school kind of like Comcast type monopoly, but a creative monopoly where you're innovating and creating products that benefit everybody and leave profits for the creator in the long run. So in the book, he gives examples of the 4 characteristics of a monopoly. And these are things that if you want to have a long-term sustaining business, you really need to have. The first is proprietary technology, okay? Think of PayPal. PayPal was the first company to really innovate online payments ever. They created the email for fiat currency payments. And granted, nowadays, we have Bitcoin and there's a lot more fintech innovation, but PayPal was really the first one to come out with some proprietary technology in that space. Therefore, ever since they launched, they've really had a monopoly on that space. And nowadays we have like Venmo and, fintech is starting to really kind of get the ball rolling. And I think over the next few years, we're going to see some major innovations. But PayPal has enjoyed long-term profitability and had a monopoly on that space for a very, very long time because they innovated. They created proprietary technology. Number 2 is what he calls the network effect. And think of Facebook. Facebook started off really, really small, and through its network, it created a monopoly. At first, it was MySpace and Facebook, but Facebook created a network effect where it just kind of grew exponentially and therefore gained a monopoly pretty much on the social network space. Even Google has done everything in their power to try to compete with that network effect that Facebook's enjoyed, but they haven't been able to really compete. And obviously, we know where MySpace is today. And then number 3 is economies of scale. Okay, so to be able to have a monopoly, you need to be able to scale your business. And in the book, Peter uses the example of yoga instructors compared to programmers. So computer programmers can work on products and services that scale, right? They can work on something that affects millions or billions of people, where a yoga instructor can really only handle a group of whatever can fit in that yoga class. Now, yes, a yoga instructor can go create a product and sell to a big amount of people, but in general, a yoga instructor or a fitness instructor can really only reach so many people at one time, where a programmer can create a product or an app or a website or anything that can affect a very large amount of people. So you want to think about scalability. And then the 4th thing is branding. Okay, the 4th characteristic of a monopoly is branding. And think about Apple. Apple created a far superior product. So they had the proprietary technology. They created the network effect where they made it cool in the early 2000s to have an iPad or an iPod, and then they had the economies of scale. They worked on something that could scale up huge, and then they built the brand. So Apple had a really, really cool brand. And if you go back and watch kind of the iconic first speech by Steve Jobs where he announced the iPod and then the iPhone, it was just incredible. And Apple's enjoyed a monopoly pretty much for a really long time because of their brand. And in the book, Peter uses kind of the contrasting example of Yahoo, where Yahoo went through a phase where they tried to make themselves cool and they tried to kind of improve their brand image. But the problem was they didn't have the technology or the network effect. They were essentially just trying to puff up their brand. So you really need to have all four of these characteristics. Okay, so that's key takeaway number one, understanding the difference between a monopoly and competition and why monopoly is so important if you want to have a long-term sustainable business. Key takeaway number two is how to find the perfect market. So how do you know what business to go into? How do you know what product to create? How do you know what demographic to target? What I love about this book is Peter gives some really, really good advice and some practical steps that you can take to build something long-term that can scale up huge. And he suggests starting with a small group. He says the perfect market is a small group of people that are not served by competitors that you can step into and really just ultimately serve a majority, if not the entire kind of population of a small group, and then start to scale into slightly broader markets. He uses the example of Facebook, where Facebook's first customer base was college kids, right? And I was actually in college. I'm Mark Zuckerberg's age. I was in college when Facebook came out, and I remember the days when you couldn't get on Facebook if you didn't have a college email address. So Mark made it really cool that if you were in college, this was the place to be. And then once that scaled up and he dominated that market, then he rolled out into other groups. High school kids came on. And then here we are, many years later, and now the fastest growing demographic of Facebook users is people in their 40s and 50s. So mom and dad are now on Facebook. And so they scaled up and they eventually had kind of this hyper growth. And Peter also says, don't disrupt. He says this is kind of like a buzzword in the startup community. Don't disrupt. Avoid competition at all costs. Because remember, if you're competing, profits get competed away. And then in line with key takeaway number two, he talks about last mover advantage, which means you want to be last to market. What he means by that is if you make the last great development in a market, you're going to enjoy long, sustainable profits. Or if you're just kind of first to market and you don't have the last great innovation in that market, then again, somebody else is going to come along and innovate something better and then take your profits. And then he also talks about if you focus only on near-term growth and near-term profits, you're going to miss the most important question, which is, are we going to be around decades from now? If you're so obsessed, and I see a lot of internet marketers that get tripped up on this. They're always worried about conversions and sales and, how do we convert the next lead? If that's all you're focused on, you're ultimately missing the big picture, which is, are you going to be in business years from now? And that's there. I think there's kind of a happy medium. I come from a very sales driven world. I come from the real estate world. I come from the physical business world of detailing cars, and then ultimately, went into Wall Street and became a trader. And then now I'm phasing into venture capital and being an angel investor and working with venture capitalists. So what I see is over here on the extreme side of kind of the San Francisco startup community, everybody's focused on big visions, and sometimes they tend to forget about profits and sales, where over here you've got like these internet marketers that are only focused on sales and getting the next dollar. So I think there's a happy medium. If you're going to start a business, You have to understand sales and persuasion, but you also really need to focus on long-term growth, long-term sustainability, or else you're just going to be spinning your wheels and jumping from business to business to business. And then key takeaway number 3 is there are 7 questions that every business must answer. And I love these questions, guys, so really hone in on this. Question number 1 that your business must answer if it's going to survive is the engineering question, the technology question. Can you create breakthrough technology instead of incremental improvements? He talks about how if you're going to innovate, you need something that innovates on a massive scale. You need to be leaps and bounds above the closest competition. You don't want to just improve a little bit on the latest product. You want to improve a lot of it. And then question number 2 is the timing question. Is now the right time to start your business? Is it the right time in the economy? Is it the right time in that industry, in that market, in that space? Which leads us to step 3 is the monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share or a small market? Okay, are you going for a small market that you can scale up, or are you trying to go after everybody? And he talks about why it's so important to start with that small market first and then scale up. Question number 4 is the people question. Do you have the right team? It's all about the team, guys. And I wholeheartedly believe this. And I've interviewed, venture capitalists and angel investors, and everybody seems to be in agreement that it's all about the team. The product is just really a byproduct of the team. Invest in people. Look at the people, because you can have a great idea and a shitty team, and if you don't have a good team, you're not going to be able to execute that idea. But a great team can take a mediocre idea and execute it properly and well, and ultimately have long-term sustainable profits. And that leads us to question number 5, the distribution question, okay? Do you have a way to not just create, but deliver your product? In other words, can you sell your product? All right, and then question number 6 is the durability question. Can your market position be defensible decades from now? Are you just building a business that's going to survive for a year or two, or are you building something that's going to be around for decades? And for new entrepreneurs, this can be kind of tough, because I talk to some guys and ladies that are like, look, I'm just trying to eat. I'm just trying to survive. And the problem is, if you're just solely focused on making money today, you're not going to build a business that's going to be around for a long time. Yeah, you might be able to pay your bills for a little while, but the idea is to build a business that is sustainable over the long run, right? So just think about that, the durability question. And then that leads us to the final question, question 7, which is the secret question, which is, have you identified the unique opportunity that others don't see? This is really what innovation is all about, guys, is you want to go against the herd. You want to look through and kind of think like Wayne Gretzky. Where's the puck going? Where's the puck going to be? I'm a hockey player. I grew up playing hockey, and we always thought that way. It was like, there's my guy. I'm going to get the puck. He's going to put it in front of me. He's not going to hit it to where I am now. Where's the market going? Where's the world going? What question should I be asking that nobody's thinking about? So if you can answer those 7 questions, you might have a long-term sustainable business. Okay, so it's time for some final thoughts. The overarching theme, the main theme, final thought number 1, innovate or die. Go from 0 to 1. Innovate something new. Second final thought, dominate. Don't compete. Think creative monopoly. Think about those 7 questions. What can you do? What can you build? What can you create that's going to be around for decades to come? And then number 3 here, put a lot of thought into the beginning, okay? Put a lot of thought into your startup, right? A startup, you can have startups that are still startups that have been in business for years. A startup is a startup when it's innovating, when it's creating. The minute it stops innovating, the minute it stops creating is when it stops being a startup. Okay. There's 3 characteristics of a monopoly, and there are 7 questions that you need to think about to build a successful business. So I hope this is helpful, guys. Again, this is a book that, in my opinion, absolutely deserves a deep dive, which means I think you should read it from front to back. These overarching main key components and main themes are great, but the examples and the stories in here will really help solidify these lessons. So go ahead and grab that book. I'll link it up in the show notes. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This book is absolutely worth a deep dive. Go ahead and grab it. We'll link it up in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to the show here on YouTube, also on iTunes. And, please share this with anybody that you think would benefit from the show. My mission is to help 100,000 people become financially independent. And that means, earning more income, building more wealth, and upgrading different areas of your life, including owning your time, which is really what true wealth is all about. So go to chrisdunn.com for show notes. Let me know if you guys have any questions or feedback on these episodes. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care.